Hello, it's day 79, and I want to talk about the least helpful person in the world. That's right, Dia Buddy. Today is the day when I want to talk about my gym teacher. I touched a little bit on my elementary school gym teacher, but today I want to talk about a specific high school gym teacher who I remember all these years later. And I swear to you, I'm not one of these people who just relives my high school days over and over again. But when I talk about weight loss and dieting, I have to talk about high school because that's the time when so many of my issues really came to the forefront. That's when I started binge eating. That's when my emotions started getting out of control. That's when I started feeling anxiety for the first time. It's when I started the yo-yo diet thing. And today, when I stepped on the scale, and I'd been stable for so many days, and now for whatever reason I've gained some poundage, and I'm not really sure why. So yes, today is a good day to tackle Mrs. Jones. Name changed to protect the innocent once again. Mrs. Jones taught high school aerobics for girls, and I was in her class my junior year. She was the gym teacher who busted out the calipers to squeeze us all. She was kind of an unhealthy person in her own way. She was overweight, she was very short, and I remember her being very much like a drill sergeant. She was the kind of woman who would get up in your face if you did something even a little bit wrong. Needless to say, we all hated her. And looking back now, being a teacher myself, I realized that a lot of her behavior and a lot of the way she acted, I think, stemmed from not her teaching style per se, but from a reaction to many classrooms that probably got out of hand. I think when you're teaching a group of 30 or 40 16-year-old girls, you kind of have to anticipate certain things happening. For instance, drama erupting in the class, bullying erupting in the class, and I think Mrs. Jones dealt with that by clamping us down so tight that none of us could really move or breathe or think without her knowing it. So it was an awful gym experience. However, the actual workout portion of it was pretty solid. Mrs. Jones could bust your ass for 45 minutes straight. The woman knew her aerobics, and she would put on these weird German EDM songs, and we would just be stepping and jumping, jump roping, square dancing. We did a lot of very strange aerobic exercises. And here is the most frustrating part for me. I feel like if that class had been smaller, if it had been 10 to 15 girls, I think that would have been a really fun class. I think if there had been fewer girls to keep under her thumb, Mrs. Jones would have been a pretty damn good aerobics instructor. But with the way it was, schools being underfunded and as many girls as possible being crammed into one singular space, Mrs. Jones was a goddamn nightmare. The woman was savage, and I don't just mean on the workout side. She would body shame you. She body shamed us daily. That was her way of motivating us. This was back in 2004, 2005, and it wasn't unusual to just hear it over the gym's loudspeaker, because she had one of those little microphones that she would yell at us through. Stacy, you're too chubby to be slacking off like that. Things like that. And that wasn't an every now and then thing. That was an everyday thing. So think about getting called to the blackboard, okay? If you're scared to work out a math problem, for example, and the teacher calls on you and you have to go up there and show everybody how to do it, it's that kind of anxiety, except you might get called out for being the chubby girl over the gym's loudspeaker. And I'm not exaggerating, you guys. This is something that would never be able to fly these days. But I grew up in a rural school district. I grew up in an area where a certain type of person tended to be in charge. And that person was a salt of the earth kind of person, if you get my drift. Salt of the earth people were in charge, which meant, oh, if you're getting bullied, you're just a baby. If you're an ugly girl, you're not worth much. If you're a skinny boy, you're not worth much. If you don't play football, not worth much. Not a cheerleader, not worth much. I guess every school has a problem like that at some point. But again, looking back as a teacher now, I feel like it wasn't out of control yet. But I feel like probably 2 or 3 years after I left that school, I bet it got really out of control. I bet that school spiraled and spiraled down into nothingness within like 2 to 3 years. It was bad when I was there, but you could see like the shadow of even worse things. I remember my senior year, we had like a teacher who had to leave because there was a sex abuse scandal. And when I look back at that school now, I stalked their website, I'm not gonna lie. I stalked the school's website. None of the principals, none of the teachers, none of the janitors even are original from my time there. That might be silly to say because yes, I'm getting to be an old lady, I feel like, and expecting that my high school should be exactly the same as when I left it is unreasonable, but the fact that none of my teachers are still there should tell you something. Like, we all know that venerable old teacher in our school who has been there for like 50 years and will never leave. My school doesn't have one of those. Everybody there is like under 30 who's teaching. Which isn't to say that all of my teachers were bad. That's not true at all. I had a really great English teacher, Mr. McVeigh. You know, he made me want to read, like actually made me want to read. I had a really great math teacher, Mr. Steele. He was the kind of guy who, you know, he didn't care what you looked like or who you were. But Mrs. Jones was the devil. Mrs. Jones was one of those voices that makes you feel like you're never going to be good enough. She's one of those voices that I've internalized over the years, and I don't really know what got me thinking about her today. I'm afraid. All this time I've been saying that I think I'm afraid that I won't succeed. I'm also equally afraid that I will succeed. What will happen to me if I finally lose the weight and my life doesn't transform the way I always dreamt it would? Then I not only lose, what I was, but I also lose all the hope that I had for the future. Is that a silly way to think? You gotta tell me, Diet Buddy. See, I think that there are a lot of people, particularly Americans, who believe that it's just a matter of time until everything falls into place and becomes perfect. Eventually, we're all going to get famous, we're all going to get rich, we're all going to be skinny, we're all going to be whisked away by our favorite K-pop idol to a life of luxury and perfect ideal love to be put on Instagram. But that's not the way the world works. The ghost of Mrs. Jones will haunt me no longer this evening. I'll see you tomorrow.